What happens when one of the most talked about women in the world walks onto a morning television set and turns a simple interview into an absolute disaster? In just 33 seconds of one single comment, everything would spiral completely out of control. This is Good Morning Britain. The cameras are rolling. Millions of people across the country are watching live from their homes. It's a regular weekday morning. The studio lights are bright. The set looks perfect. And sitting behind the desk is Susanna Reid, one of the most respected journalists in British television. She's calm, she's professional, she's prepared for what she thinks will be a straightforward conversation. Walking onto that set is Meghan Markle, the former actress, the Duchess, the woman who has dominated headlines for years. She's there to talk about her latest projects, her life, her perspective on everything that's happened. The audience is excited. This is the kind of guest that makes morning television must-watch content. Everyone wants to hear what she has to say. Susanna starts the interview exactly how you'd expect. Warm, welcoming, professional. She smiles at Meghan and says, "Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're really pleased to have you here." Meghan smiles back, but there's something different about it. Something a little bit cold, a little bit distant. She nods and says, "Thank you for having me." The first few questions are simple, easy. Susanna asks about Meghan's recent work, about causes she cares about life in general. Meghan answers, but her responses are short, clipped. There's a tension in the air that the cameras are picking up. The producers in the control room are watching carefully. Something feels off. Then Susanna does what any good journalist would do. She asks a real question, a question with substance. She leans forward slightly and says, "There's been a lot of discussion about some of the claims you've made in previous interviews. Some people have questioned the accuracy of certain statements. How do you respond to those who say there are inconsistencies in your accounts?" It's a fair question. It's asked respectfully. It's the kind of question that journalists are supposed to ask. But the moment those words leave Susanna's mouth, everything changes. Meghan's face transforms. The polite smile disappears completely. Her eyes narrow. She sits up straighter in her chair, and there's a long, uncomfortable pause. The studio goes quiet. You can feel the tension through the screen. Then Meghan speaks, and what she says shocks everyone watching. "Are you seriously asking me that question right now?" Her voice is sharp, cold. "Are you actually sitting there, on national television, and questioning my truth?" Susanna remains completely calm. Her voice is steady, professional, measured. She says, "I'm simply asking you to address the concerns that some people have raised. It's a legitimate question, but Meghan isn't having it." She cuts Susanna off before she can finish. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to sit there in your comfortable chair with your comfortable life and question what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to be me." The camera operators are adjusting their angles. They know this is becoming something big, something dramatic, something that people will be talking about for days. Susanna takes a breath. She's dealing with difficult guests her entire career. She knows how to handle this. She speaks calmly and clearly. "I'm not questioning what you've been through. I'm asking you to clarify some statements that have been disputed by others." That's journalism. That's what we do here. Meghan laughs, but it's not a friendly laugh. It's bitter, mocking. She shakes her head and says, "That's what you call journalism? Really? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks a lot more like a witch hunt." The other hosts on the set are frozen. They don't know whether to jump in or stay quiet. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Susanna doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't get defensive. She simply says, "I understand this is a sensitive topic, but our viewers deserve to hear all sides of the story. If there are facts that need to be clarified, this is an opportunity to do that." But Meghan is done listening. She leans forward, pointing her finger across the desk, and her voice gets louder. "All sides of the story? All sides? What about my side? What about the fact that I've been vilified, attacked, and torn apart by people like you, who claim to be asking innocent questions?" "I'm not attacking you," Susanna responds, her voice still calm. "I'm doing my job." "Your job?" Meghan's voice is rising now. People in the studio are getting uncomfortable. "Your job is to tear people down? Your job is to make people feel small? Is that what you wake up every morning excited to do?" Susanna keeps her composure completely. This is what separates a real professional from everyone else. She doesn't take the bait. She doesn't get emotional. She simply says, "My job is to ask questions that our audience wants answered. That's what journalism is. Meghan stands up. Right there, in the middle of the interview, she stands up from her chair. The microphone is still attached to her jacket. The cameras are still rolling. Millions of people are watching this unfold live. "You know what?" Meghan says, her voice shaking with anger. "I don't have to sit here and take this. I don't have to justify myself to you or to anyone watching this ridiculous show. The producers are panicking in the control room. This has never happened before. Guests don't just stand up and walk off. Not on live television. Not like this." Susanna tries to de-escalate. She holds up a hand and says, "Please, let's just take a breath and continue the conversation. I think there's been a misunderstanding." But Meghan is already unhooking her microphone. Her hands are shaking with rage. She throws the microphone down onto the chair she was just sitting in. The sound of it hitting the furniture echoes through the studio. "There's no misunderstanding," Meghan says. "The only misunderstanding is that I thought I could come on this show and be treated with respect. Clearly, I was wrong." One of the producers walks onto the set, trying to calm things down. Trying to figure out what to do? This is live television. There's no pause button. There's no do-over. Whatever happens next is going to happen in front of the entire country. Susanna stands up now too. Not in aggression, but in an attempt to salvage the situation. She says, "Meghan, I apologize if you felt disrespected. That was never my intention. Please, sit back down and let's talk about this." But Meghan is already moving toward the edge of the set. She turns back to face Susanna one more time. And what she says next will be replayed on every news channel, every social media platform, every talk show for weeks to come. "You want to know the real problem with people like you, Susanna? You hide behind this mask of professionalism, but really, you're just like all the rest. You're jealous, you're bitter, and you can't stand that some people refuse to be broken by your petty questions and your small-minded attacks. The entire studio goes silent, the crew members are staring, the other hosts are speechless, even the camera operators have stopped moving." Susanna stands there, absolutely stunned. But she doesn't fight back. She doesn't yell. She doesn't insult Meghan in return. She simply says, very quietly, "I think you should leave." Meghan lets out a sharp laugh. "Oh, don't worry. I'm already gone. Enjoy your little show." And with that, she turns and walks off the set. Her heels click against the floor. The sound echoes through the silent studio. Everyone watches as she disappears through the studio doors. The cameras are still rolling. Susanna stands there for a moment, processing what just happened. Then she turns to face the camera directly. She takes a deep breath. And she does what a true professional does. She continues the show. "Well," Susanna says, her voice remarkably steady considering what just occurred. "That was certainly unexpected. We'll take a quick break and be right back." The show cuts to commercial. But in those few minutes before the break, something remarkable happened on live television. The audience watching at home saw exactly what happened when entitlement met professionalism. They saw what happened when someone used to getting their way faced someone who wouldn't back down from doing their job. In the control room, the producers are already making calls. Legal teams are being contacted, PR people are being woken up, social media is exploding. The clip of Meghan's outburst is already being shared thousands of times. The phones in the studio are ringing off the hook. But back on the set, Susanna is sitting calmly in her chair during the commercial break. Her colleagues come over to check on her. They ask if she's okay. They tell her she handled it perfectly. She just nods and takes a sip of water. When the show comes back from commercial, Susanna addresses what happened head on. She looks into the camera and speaks directly to the viewers at home. "As you just saw, our interview with Meghan Markle ended rather abruptly. I want to be clear about what happened there. I asked legitimate questions that I believe our viewers deserve to hear answered. Unfortunately, those questions were not well received. We always strive to treat our guests with respect while also doing our jobs as journalists. I believe we did that today. It's a perfect response. Calm, factual, professional, no dramatics, no emotions, just the truth of what happened." The rest of the show continues as normal. Susanna moves on to the next segment, like the consummate professional she is. But everyone watching knows they've just witnessed something extraordinary. They've seen a host maintain her dignity and composure in the face of an outrageous outburst. They've seen someone refuse to be bullied or intimidated on their own show. Back to that moment on the set before Meghan walked off. There was a brief second where things could have gone differently. Right after Susanna said, "I think you should leave," Meghan paused. Just for a fraction of a second. Like maybe, just maybe, she realized she'd gone too far. Like maybe she was about to apologize and sit back down. But that moment passed. Pride took over. Anger took over. And instead of taking responsibility for her reaction, Meghan doubled down. She made her dramatic exit. She burned the bridge completely. Let's go back even further, to the question that started it all. When Susanna asked about the inconsistencies in previous statements, that question wasn't out of nowhere. It wasn't a gotcha attempt. It was based on documented concerns that had been raised by multiple sources. It was a question that any serious journalist would have asked. But instead of answering it, instead of using the opportunity to clarify her position, Meghan chose to attack. She chose to make it personal. She accused Susanna of jealousy, of being bitter, of conducting a witch hunt. These weren't just defensive responses. They were calculated attacks designed to shift the narrative away from the questions and onto the questioner. And here's what makes this whole situation so revealing. Susanna never once made it about herself. Even when Meghan was hurling personal insults at her, Susanna kept bringing it back to the questions, to the facts, to the job of journalism. She refused to engage in a personal battle. She maintained her professionalism throughout. Think about what the viewers at home were seeing. On one side of that desk, they saw someone staying calm, asking reasonable questions, trying to have a constructive conversation. On the other side, they saw someone getting increasingly angry, refusing to answer questions, making personal attacks, and eventually storming off the set. The contrast couldn't have been more clear. And that's why this moment resonated with so many people, because it wasn't just about one interview on one morning show. It was about something bigger. It was about accountability. It was about whether public figures should be able to control the narrative completely, or whether journalists have a right and a responsibility to ask difficult questions. During the commercial break, while Meghan was presumably leaving the building, the other hosts gathered around Susanna. They offered support. They said things like, "You handled that brilliantly," and she was completely out of line. But Susanna just shook her head. She wasn't interested in making herself the victim or the hero. She just wanted to get back to doing her job, and that's exactly what she did. When the show came back on air, she moved forward. She interviewed other guests. She covered other stories. She proved that the show was bigger than any one dramatic moment, bigger than any one difficult guest. The viewers who stuck around after the Meghan incident saw something else important. They saw that Good Morning Britain wasn't going to be bullied into silence. They saw that the show would continue asking tough questions, continue holding people accountable, continue doing real journalism even when it was uncomfortable. Let's talk about the specific words Meghan used during her outbursts. When she said, "You don't get to question my truth," that phrase revealed everything. Because the thing about truth is, if it's really true, it can withstand questions. It can withstand scrutiny. Real truth doesn't need to hide behind accusations of witch hunts or personal attacks on journalists. When she said, "You have no idea what it's like to be me," she was trying to put herself in a category above criticism. She was suggesting that her experiences were so unique, so special, that normal standards of accountability didn't apply. But that's not how it works. That's not how anything works. And when she accused Susanna of jealousy, of bitterness, that's when the mask really slipped. Because those accusations said more about Meghan than they did about Susanna. They revealed someone who couldn't imagine that people might have legitimate concerns about her statements. Someone who could only interpret questions as personal attacks. Susanna's response to all of this was masterful. She never got defensive. She never said, "How dare you accuse me of being jealous?" She never made it about her feelings or her reputation. She just kept calmly stating facts. "I'm doing my job. I'm asking questions our viewers want answered." That's the difference between someone who's secure in their position and someone who isn't. Susanna didn't need to defend herself with elaborate explanations or emotional appeals. She let her professionalism speak for itself. Think about the pressure Susanna was under in those moments. She's on live television. Millions of people are watching. A high-profile guest is having a meltdown right in front of her. The natural human response would be to get flustered, to panic, to either back down completely or to fight back aggressively. But Susanna didn't either. She stayed in that middle ground of calm professionalism. She acknowledged Meghan's feelings without validating the accusations. She offered an opportunity to continue the conversation without begging or groveling. She set a boundary when necessary by saying, "I think you should leave," but she said it quietly, without drama. This is what years of experience looks like. This is what real skill looks like. anyone can handle an interview when things are going smoothly. The mark of a true professional is how they handle things when everything falls apart. The moment when Meghan threw down her microphone was particularly telling. That wasn't just an emotional reaction. That was a statement. It was a gesture designed to show contempt, to demonstrate that she was above the whole situation. But what it actually demonstrated was a loss of control. It showed someone who couldn't handle being challenged, even politely, even professionally. Compare that to how Susanna handled the microphone moment. She didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked or offended. She just watched it happen, processed it, and moved forward. Because she understood that Meghan's dramatic gestures weren't about her. They were about Meghan trying to regain control of a situation where she felt challenged. After Meghan left the studio, there was this moment of collective breath-holding. Everyone on set was wondering what would happen next. Would the show be able to continue? Would there be legal ramifications? Would this become a massive scandal? But Susanna made a choice in that moment. She chose to treat it as what it was, an unfortunate incident, but not the end of the world. By staying calm, by addressing it briefly and factually, and then by moving on, she took away the power of the drama. She refused to let one guest's behavior derail an entire show. Let's revisit the accusations Meghan made about the questions being a witch hunt. The thing is, a witch hunt implies a malicious, baseless persecution. But there was nothing malicious about Susanna's questions. They were based on actual discrepancies that had been publicly noted. They were asked in a respectful tone. They were given with an opportunity for clarification. A real witch hunt would have involved aggressive questions, hostile body language, constant interruptions, and a refusal to let the guest explain themselves. None of that happened here. What happened was a journalist asking a reasonable question and a guest completely overreacting. Meghan's claim that Susanna was trying to make her feel small was equally unfounded. At no point did Susanna talk down to Meghan. She never used a condescending tone. She never implied that Meghan was stupid or inferior. She simply asked questions. The fact that Meghan interpreted those questions as attacks says everything about her mindset and nothing about Susanna's intentions. When Susanna offered an apology, saying, "I apologize if you felt disrespected," that was a masterclass in diplomatic communication. Notice she didn't apologize for asking the question. She didn't back down from her journalistic responsibility. She simply acknowledged Meghan's feelings while standing firm on her actions. That's exactly the right balance. The other hosts on the set that morning later talked about how difficult it was to watch their colleague being attacked like that. They wanted to jump in, to defend Susanna, to tell Meghan she was out of line. But they also knew that doing so might escalate the situation further. So they stayed quiet, trusting Susanna to handle it, which she did brilliantly. One of the most powerful moments of the whole incident was when Susanna said, "I believe we did that today," after explaining that the show always strives to treat guests with respect while doing journalism. There was no doubt in her voice, no uncertainty. She believed completely in what she had done and how she had done it. That confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet assurance of someone who knows they acted with integrity. Susanna didn't need validation from Meghan or from anyone else. She knew she had done her job properly, and that was enough. The viewers who watched this unfold had a lot of different reactions. Some were shocked. Some were angry on Susanna's behalf. Some thought Meghan had a point. But the overwhelming majority of people recognized what they were seeing: a professional doing her job and someone else refusing to accept accountability. Social media exploded immediately. People were sharing the clip. They were analyzing every word, every gesture, every facial expression. The hashtag started trending within minutes. Everyone had an opinion about what had happened and what it meant. But through all of that noise, one thing remained clear. Susanna Reid had handled an impossible situation with grace, skill, and professionalism. She had refused to be intimidated. She had refused to abandon her journalistic principles. And she had shown millions of viewers what it looks like to maintain dignity under pressure. The question that started everything, about inconsistencies in previous statements, never got answered. That's the real tragedy of what happened. Because if Meghan had simply addressed the question calmly and factually, this could have been a productive conversation. Instead, it became a dramatic exit that overshadowed everything else. Think about what could have happened if Meghan had responded differently. She could have said, "I understand why some people have questions, and I'd like to address those." She could have explained her position clearly and calmly. She could have used the platform to tell her side of the story in her own words. Instead, she chose confrontation. She chose to make accusations. She chose to storm off the set. And in doing so, she made the story about her behavior rather than about whatever point she might have wanted to make. Susanna gave Meghan every opportunity to turn things around. Even after the initial defensive response, Susanna tried to calm the situation. She offered multiple chances to continue the conversation. She never closed the door on a productive discussion. But Meghan slammed that door herself. The phrase, "I think you should leave," only came after Meghan had already made it clear she was leaving. Susanna wasn't kicking her off the show. She was simply acknowledging the reality of what was happening. It was a statement of fact, not an aggressive dismissal. And even in that moment, Susanna's tone remained calm. She didn't yell it. She didn't spit it out angrily. She just stated it quietly and clearly. That restraint, that control, is remarkable given the circumstances. After the show ended that day, Susanna apparently went about her normal routine. She didn't give dramatic interviews about what happened. She didn't go on social media to defend herself. She just continued with her work, because for her, it was one incident in a long career. It was dramatic, yes, but it didn't define her or shake her confidence in her abilities. That's the mark of someone who truly knows who they are and what they stand for. They don't need to constantly defend themselves or prove themselves. They let their actions speak for themselves. The incident became a case study in how to handle difficult situations on live television. Journalism schools started using the clip as an example of maintaining professionalism under pressure. Media trainers pointed to Susanna's response as the gold standard for dealing with hostile guests. But for Susanna herself, it was probably just another day at work. A more dramatic day than usual, certainly, but still just part of the job. Because when you're a real professional, you don't do the right thing for recognition or praise. You do it because it's what you're supposed to do. The final image of the incident, Meghan's back as she walked away from the set, her heels clicking on the floor, became iconic. It represented so much more than just one person leaving one interview. It represented what happens when entitlement meets reality. It represented what happens when someone refuses to accept that they might be held accountable for their words and actions. And sitting at that desk, watching her go, was Susanna Reid. Calm, professional, unshaken, ready to continue with the show, ready to keep doing her job. A reminder that true strength isn't about never being challenged. It's about how you respond when you are.